Patty Smith, please go ahead.
Thank you. I have a comment. The Sunshine Law requires public deliberation, and your last in-person meeting, which was the first ever that I have attended, lacked it completely. There was zero public deliberation prior to your motions, which means that it is being done somewhere else prior to the meeting and outside of public view, excuse me, which is in clear violation of the Sunshine Law. I'm requesting that every item on this agenda today be accompanied by deliberation so that the public can see how and why you are making the decisions that you are. If you choose not to do so, then I request a detailed explanation prior to your motion of how and why you came to the determination that you have so that the public can fully understand why you are making the motion that you are. There was another clear violation during your last in-person board meeting. John Capuana, a representative for WSS Integrated Technologies, who was sitting in the audience, stood to ask the status of Project 260347, the Comprehensive Security Service, and was told by a person sitting at the table that he would speak to him privately after the meeting. This, too, is a clear violation of the law. I request to know what was discussed at the in-person discussion between the two men regarding the status of the project. The public has a right to this information under the law, and it should not be the public's responsibility to request that you do so. Nonetheless, I am making that request today, that starting with this meeting, you follow the Sunshine Law requirements and be transparent about how and why you are making the decisions that you are during your board meetings. Thank you.
Ms. New, I can assure you that we do not violate the Sunshine Law, and at this time I will yield to our Chief Counsel, Rod Diaz.
Thank you, Chairman Holden. Again, I want to reiterate that while, ma'am, you may disagree, we believe we are in compliance with the Sunshine Act. The board does give anyone an opportunity to ask additional questions about anything they are voting on. And if people do have those questions, we've addressed them. You happen to have attended a meeting where there weren't any questions as to what was going on. This meeting, we can provide a little bit more information if you have particular questions about any particular item we are voting on. As to the gentleman who asked the question about the procurement matter, in fact, that is a pending procurement, so no information can be provided, and that's what he was informed. So one of my attorneys reached out to him afterwards and informed him we cannot provide any information because it's a pending matter.
And why was that not stated to him during the meeting? Why was he told that we would discuss it after the meeting in private?
Because simply we had to ascertain which procurement in particular he was asking about. We have multiple procurements going on at any one time, and it took us a second to realize that the procurement he was asking about was, in fact, an ongoing procurement, so it wasn't anything we could comment on. It wasn't on our list of matters to discuss for that same reason.
Okay, so again, the Sunshine Law clearly requires public deliberation, and in your meetings you are not doing that. If you're saying to me that it's the public's responsibility to request your deliberation on each specific agenda item, then I'm going to tell you I'm doing that in advance for each item on this agenda, because the public has a right to know how you're coming to these decisions and how you're making these decisions. I, being a member of the public, am requesting that for all the items on the agenda. If I have to do that one by one, I will, or else you can just accept my blanket request now.
Well, I'll tell you what, because the Chief Counsel information goes first, if it's okay with the board members, I can give you a brief explanation of what's being considered. If you have any additional questions, you can certainly ask them. And then
no, I know what's being discussed. I have the agenda. What the public has a right to know is how you're coming to your decision on each item, how you're making that decision, and that is not being given to the public during your board meetings, and that's what I'm requesting. I mean, when I was at the last meeting, right, you just said, here's the agenda item, we make this motion, I accept. That's how the whole meeting went. You went through like 40 agenda items in less than 15 minutes. There is no deliberation. The public has no ability to know how or why you're making these decisions. And per the Sunshine Law, we have a right to that information. And you're responsible to do that at the public meeting. Because you're not, you're clearly doing it somewhere else, which is a violation. There's no way you're all coming to these board meetings cold, not knowing anything, and not discussing the topics and just making a ruling. And if that's how you are proceeding, then there's a whole other set of problems.
Well, again, we're going to disagree as to what's required at these meetings, but as we go through agenda items, we can provide some additional information. As you know, the board does not have to come into the meetings cold. It's allowed to consider these things. It just has to make its decision at the public meeting.
No, I'm quoting from the Sunshine Law. The Sunshine Law requires public deliberation. That's a direct quote from the law. You are not doing that when you say, I make a motion to do this, and I agree. That is not public deliberation under any stretch of the imagination. And I'm reading directly from the law. We're going to have an opportunity
to discuss these matters at the meeting now. You are free to ask whatever questions you wish to ask.
But the Sunshine Law does not say it is the burden of the public to force the board to do so. That is not my requirement. You have the requirement to have public deliberations. It is not my responsibility to stand up and ask you to do so item by item. Because if there was no public at the meeting, then there's no way for us to know that, because it wouldn't be in the minutes because it's not being discussed. So it is not my responsibility to do so. But because you're putting it on me today, I'm making that request for each item on this agenda. Each one, I'm making that request.
And again, as I said, the first business is business that's coming from my office. I'll be happy to provide an additional explanation. If you have questions, I'll be happy to answer them, and then the board can take a vote. That's...
Yes, I have my specific question for each item on the agenda is how and why you have come to the determination that you have.
Then
it's
let's
standing
go through the
request.
items. Let's continue with the meeting, and we'll give an explanation of what's going on, and then we'll move forward.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Are there any other questions?